Hi guys, this is Fabiola with Wow Women News. So this video is going to be about signs of protein damage or protein overload and some tips on how to deal with it and get your hair back to its regular curl pattern without being overly damaged and without you losing all of your hair. First things first, signs of having protein damage. They can be, well, usually it's going to be really dry and brittle hair. The hair feels almost like hay to the touch, and you can actually hear the sound of your hair when you're touching it. It sounds very crunchy. It sounds very, it sounds like it's in a plastic bag, if you will, that sound. And it feels very different than what your normal hair texture is. It's almost unmistakable. You know you have protein damage because your hair just doesn't even feel like it's ever felt before. Another sign of protein damage is looking at the tips of your ends. Now, if you know that your ends are generally nice and even for the most part, but then you're looking at your hair and not only do the ends look very dry, but you can see spaces in between and they look very brittle, that's also a sign of serious breakage and probably some sort of protein overload. There's another way that you can see if you have protein overload, and that's to do a strand test and pulling out one strand or two and looking at the curl pattern. You don't even really have to pull out a strand to see that. If you just stretch out your hair loosely and take a look at the curl pattern, you'll actually notice that the natural curl pattern of your hair is not there. It looks out of whack. It looks like maybe you've got large loops, some coiling, not very much. It's not consistent. That is a telltale sign that your hair is suffering from major overload, and there's one thing that you have to do first, and immediately when you notice that you have protein overload. So, well, I guess now we're going to talk about what you can do to fight protein overload. Well, the first thing you should do is immediately clarify your hair. Wash your hair out. There's some people I know who have used sulfates or shampoos with sulfates to clarify their hair. Others who have put some baking soda in their shampoos to clarify their hair. And you can do a mud wash. You can do a vinegar wash. It depends on how extreme the damage is. So for some people, using a sulfate shampoo might just work, but for somebody else, it might just end up aggravating the situation, making it worse. So unfortunately, it's a trial and error. Now, this is a very sensitive part in the routine of rectifying protein overload, because one little mistake could actually send your hair over the bridge of complete damage and past the point of return for some. So what I would suggest doing is maybe testing out one portion of the hair, maybe somewhere in the back where you wouldn't be able to notice, and see if using a sulfate shampoo will neutralize the protein, the excess protein that you have in your hair, and that way you can start from a clean slate and go ahead and do something that really helped me when I experienced protein overload was I did my mud washes. I became a master at making my mud, mixing my mud, putting oils in there and making it smell amazing. I used a family's old recipe and then I infused those ingredients into my mud mixture, and that really helped me clarify my hair. Also, when I was clarifying my hair, I definitely followed up with a vinegar wash that I also used that family recipe and put into that as well to further clarify and seal the cuticles. So you really want to do the most healthy clarifying process for your hair. Again, I'm going to stress, sometimes for some people, using sulfates will help. But I think that you can get to as close as using sulfates as possible by using baking soda to clarify your hair without having to actually use a shampoo that has chemicals in it. So now going into the next step of uh, removing your protein overload. So after you've clarified your hair and you've sealed your cuticles with the moisture, there's some people have different ways of doing it. I've read that there are methods of actually using the vinegar after you've deep conditioned, because it definitely seals in all that moisture. There are people who do their vinegar rinse in between. They're clarifying with something like a mud wash or shampoo and their deep conditioner. It really depends on how your hair responds. So for me, I like to do my vinegar rinse after the fact, after I've clarified and after I've deep conditioned my hair, because it does seal in my moisture much better. So after you've clarified with shampoo, you want to make sure that you are deep conditioning your hair. Your hair needs moisture. It needs a lot of moisture. In fact, the reason why that curl pattern, if you have that sign of damage, of it being all out of whack and topsy-turvy, that's because you have so much protein on your hair that it is dried up your hair strand, your hair follicle, and your hair is actually losing its curl pattern from dryness and getting ready to break is what's happening. So at that point, your hair just wants to go back to being regularly curly to its normal curl pattern, and the way to achieve that curl pattern again is to put moisture back into your hair. So this was an issue for me, because when I suffered from protein overload, the first thing that I did was try to find a product on the market that didn't have protein in it, because I also happen to be protein sensitive, and I really wasn't able to find a product that didn't have protein in it and or other cones and chemicals that were not the greatest for my hair. So I really went back to my natural way of doing things, and I stayed really using mostly natural products to get my hair back on track again and to regulate my pH balance, because now at this point I was at a battle of regulating pH balance as well as ensuring that I had the right level of protein in my hair as well as the right amount of moisture in my hair. So this is a science that we all should learn and use when learning to be masters of our hair. So that was what I was dealing with was finding a product that didn't have those things, and I couldn't find it. So the best thing on the shelf that I actually had and used was the Aussie's 3-Minute Miracle. Now, this is not a natural product. It has cones in it, but after I clarified my hair with my mud, I felt as if my hair needed something that was deep moisturizing, and even though I had my shea butter and I had my olive oil, I found them to be too greasy, and they were sealing my hair in ways that I didn't want them to seal my hair at the time. I think my hair just needed something to fill in all that space and get in there past the protein, past the damage. For me, what was working as a deep conditioner was the Aussies. I did use my other natural products. I did make a whipped shea mixture with lots of herbs and things like that. Mixture to put into my hair after the fact, after my hair was dry. I used that to further seal in the moisture. Now, keep in mind that everything that I was using to bring my hair back from protein overload was definitely protein free. This is key. You do not want to add anything to your hair that has protein in it, and I really can't stress that enough. Before my hair actually got better, it was getting worse because I was not very educated on protein, as far as how overload of protein and sensitivity to protein affects the hair. So this was a learning process for me, and I saw it as a very positive thing, even though I did experience a lot of breakage and damage, which I fixed. As you guys can see, this is my curly girl method today, and I'll get into that soon. but it was a learning experience for me because I never knew that I was protein sensitive. I was never using products with protein in it when I had locks. I just used simple shampoos from Whole Foods and shea butter conditioner, and that was it. It wasn't until my hair was out and free that I started using more products. I didn't realize that I had a sensitivity. So this definitely was a learning process for me and taught me so much about my hair and so much about what it needs to stay healthy. So back to deep conditioning. Once you've clarified your hair and you are now doing your deep condition, what worked for me as far as the deep conditioning was I applied my deep conditioner, and this was the Aussie 3-Minute Miracle, and I bagged it and sat under a hooded dryer for about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how my schedule was working. And the heat really is used to open up the hair follicles so that all that moisture can get in. Now, again, this is a very tricky area because you don't want to overdo it with moisture, because what can happen is you can go from having extreme protein overload, and you can go straight from that to moisture overload, where your hair has so much moisture in it that it just stretches and stretches and stretches past the regular limit that your hair naturally stretches until it breaks. So you really have to be careful with your moisture at this point. But so you're sitting under the hooded dryer and you sit there for about 15 to 30 minutes to open those follicles and let the moisture in. Now, I was doing my routine, recovery routine at night after work. So I knew I was going just to keep that deep conditioner on my hair, leave my hair bagged, and keep it overnight. Now, I didn't do this every single night. I'm on, let's see, this is day 6 or 7 for me. So this happened to me about a week ago when I started realizing that there was some protein overload from my last deep conditioning. And so my hair is looking 10 times better. I did cut some of my ends. Actually, I cut all of my ends all around my hair. So it is shorter by an inch. That's fine with me, because honestly my hair was colored before and everything, and so I really just don't want to have any hair on my head that has any type of chemical on it. So it was fine to just give it another trim. But it is still long. Well, not long, but it's not as short as I thought it would be when I cut it. So but this is just me with all of my shrinkage today, which I'm liking. Once you've actually deep conditioned your hair, now you want to seal it. This would probably be a good time to use your vinegar wash after you've rinsed out your deep conditioner, so you can go ahead and further clarify. Especially if you're using a deep conditioner that has cones in it, the vinegar would be really good to remove some of that residue from that, and also seal the cuticles of your hair. And so using the vinegar would be good, and it also leaves your hair soft at the end of all of that. A lot of people that have suffered protein overload, I've been reading some hair threads online just to see what some women's experience with protein overload have been, and I realized that there was one common thing that kept coming up. What do I do with my hair after I have clarified it and after I have deep conditioned it? Now what? Because it's so sensitive at this point that hair really just wants to either return back to its normal curl pattern and get that moisture, or break off because it's so delicate. And I was realizing that there were a lot of women who were still having signs of protein overload even after a month of trying to fix the problem. And I realized that because they were manipulating their hair after the fact, after deep conditioning their hair, they would go ahead and double twist that area and try to find a way to put it in a protective style, that in itself was breaking the hair. So this is why I have my hair in its regular curly girl fashion today, because that was one of the mistakes I was making before I ever even read any of the threads. Early on in the process was I thought I needed to put it in a protective style, which meant that I was going to double twist it and tuck it away under a hat or something. But the manipulation of my hair was breaking it even more. So what I was finding was every time I would unravel my double twist, I would see more frayed ends, and then I would have to cut again. So I just kept cutting until I had cut about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of my hair off. So I said there has to be a better way of doing it. Haha, the bright light went off. Leave your hair alone. It's that simple. Leave your hair alone. My hair didn't just start getting better because I was clarifying it with my mud wash and deep conditioning it either with my shea butter or my 3-minute miracle from Aussie, but it was getting better because I stopped touching it. Your hair is already being manipulated as you're washing it, and as you know, you're moving it around under the cap to put it under the cap. So all of those things go into breaking the hair. The last thing that it wants to do is be touched anymore when you're done with your deep conditioning routine. So Curly Girl method is good because your hair is allowed to just coil back into some sort of a shape, and that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to go back to its normal curl pattern. So if you're using a Curly Girl method, it's going to allow it to find its way back to that. But if your hair is already damaged and you're now pulling it and twisting it, you're actually affecting your curl pattern even more, and your hair is not getting the opportunity to just coil back. So after you're done with washing out your deep conditioner, and if you're sealing it with a vinegar, what have you, just do a Curly Girl method where you just leave it alone. Okay, you just maybe spritz it with some olive oil. Again, nothing with protein in it. If you want to use shea butter, that's fine. It doesn't have protein in it. Olive oil is also good, but you want to stay away from oils like jojoba oil, coconut oil, any oil that's from a nut, almond oil. Those have protein. Stay away from them. So a light olive oil would be perfect, and just either rub it through those hairs very gently or spray it, okay, and just rub it a little bit on your hair and then leave it alone. You'll see that your hair naturally just, shrinks back. That's a good sign. That means that it's getting some moisture, because it's doing that. It's not staying stretched out and fried, and it's starting to heal itself. The last thing that you can do to really help fight protein overload, this is now working on your insides. I also found that drinking a lot of water helps with protein overload. So your hair is not only getting some moisture from what you're doing on the outside, but from the inside. You want to make sure that you are hydrated, okay? So I can't stress enough with that. Being hydrated is very important. It will help your hair get some moisture. So now these things happening from the inside and the outside should be enough to get your hair back on track again. So somebody who's dealing with protein overload for a month or more, a couple of things are probably happening there. They either have had extreme protein overload, or they're doing something wrong in the process of trying to get their hair back on track. And it's hard because what you think doesn't have protein in it does. Protein comes in, the words used to describe protein scientifically come in so many ways that you're just like, oh my God, I would have never thought that this was protein. So do your homework if you're not sure of a product before you go and you buy it. And when all else fails, go to your natural stuff. Go to your natural instinct. Not all natural products are going to be good, because a lot of natural products also have protein in it. So just do your homework and be patient. The thing about protein overload is that it can be reversed. You just have to have patience, and you have to be diligent, and you have to have a good head on your shoulders as far as being able to take control of the situation, researching a little bit, and getting out there and talking to people about it. I don't feel that we should allow things like this to make us victims. This is our hair after all. But use it to empower you, and use it to learn a lot about your hair. We have to be masters of our hair. We should not rely on companies to tell us what's good for our hair, and we stay in the dark. That's why things like protein overload happen, because many of us are just ignorant to it. I know I was. But once you know, either because you've just come across it and you haven't experienced it and you were fortunate that way, or you've learned the hard way by experiencing it, it is a positive. I'll get back with you guys and show you, the results. My hair is finally starting to feel like itself again, and the Curly Girl method rocks for that. So I'm going to be doing another DC tonight, deep conditioning tonight, with, I think tonight I'm going to be using my Aussie again, and I'm going to bag it overnight, and tomorrow I think everything should be pretty much back to normal. But I will be rocking my Curly Girl short shrinked afro for a while, just to give my hair a break from being twisted and manipulated and things like that. And I think it's gonna love me that much more for it. So I will be talking to you guys again soon.